One of the biggest misunderstandings people have when it comes to avoidant individuals is this idea that they're emotionless, that they don't care, that they're cold, detached, maybe even incapable of love. But that's not the truth. Underneath that calm, distant surface, what's really happening is a quiet battle between desire and fear. They want connection. They crave closeness just like anyone else. But to them, intimacy feels dangerous. It feels like stepping into a space where they might lose themselves, where love equals risk and vulnerability equals potential pain. If you've ever loved an avoidant, you know this dynamic all too well. One moment, there's warmth, connection, maybe even a spark of emotional intimacy. And then, suddenly, they pull away. The texts slow down. The energy shifts. You start wondering what you did wrong, when in reality, it's not about you at all. It's about what closeness triggers inside of them. Avoidance learned early on that depending on others wasn't safe. Maybe they grew up in environments where emotions were dismissed or love was conditional, where showing need or vulnerability led to rejection or disappointment. Over time, they internalized a powerful belief. If I need someone, I'll get hurt. So now, as adults, the moment someone gets too close, their nervous system interprets it as a threat, not because they don't want love, but because love feels like loss of control. It's a paradox, really. They crave love, but fear the very thing they crave. That's why they tend to keep people at arm's length. Not because they don't care, but because caring feels dangerous. The avoidant mind says, if I keep my distance, I stay safe. And when you start chasing them, trying to close that gap, they feel smothered, even if your intention is connection. This is why understanding the psychology behind avoidance is so important. It's not about labeling someone as emotionally unavailable. It's about recognizing that their behavior is rooted in survival, not cruelty. When you view them through that lens, everything changes. Instead of taking their withdrawal personally, you start seeing it as a reflection of their fear, not your inadequacy. And here's where the deeper insight lies. Understanding doesn't mean tolerating emotional distance forever. It means you stop reacting from your own insecurity. You stop mirroring their fear. Because when you can stand grounded in the face of their retreat, when you don't panic, chase, or demand, you become a source of safety rather than pressure. You start shifting the entire emotional dynamic. Psychologically, we're all wired to seek emotional safety before connection. Avoidants just have a different definition of safety. For them, safety means space. It means autonomy. It means knowing they won't lose themselves in the process of loving someone else. So when you bring understanding instead of urgency, when your energy says, "You're free, and I'm still here," they start to feel something they rarely experience: trust. This is where philosophy meets psychology. True love isn't possession, it's presence without pressure. It's saying, I see you, I understand you, and I don't need to control you to feel secure. That kind of presence is powerful. It communicates a deeper truth. You're safe to be yourself with me. And ironically, that's what begins to dissolve their fear. When an avoidant senses they won't be consumed or judged by your emotional needs, they begin to relax. Their nervous system starts to interpret you not as a threat, but as a steady anchor, someone who isn't trying to take something from them, but someone who brings peace. Think about it. If every time you got close to someone, your body braced for rejection or engulfment, you'd need reassurance, not pressure. You'd need someone calm enough to hold space for your fears without feeding them. That's what separates chasing love from becoming love. The more you understand their inner world, the more influence you actually have, not through control, but through compassion. So the next time you notice distance from someone with avoidant tendencies, take a breath. Don't rush in to fix it. Don't spiral into self-blame. Just remember, what looks like rejection is often self-protection. When you can meet that moment with understanding instead of fear, you shift from being another source of pressure to being the presence that disarms their defenses. And that's where real connection begins, not by forcing closeness, but by creating the kind of emotional space where it can grow naturally. Because in the end, the key to making an avoidant see you as the one starts here, not with persuasion or pursuit, but with perception. Seeing beyond their silence to the fear beneath it. Seeing the human beneath the armor. When you understand the fear behind the distance, you stop chasing love and start becoming the calm it runs toward. You said, expand key point 2 into a 700-word segment that flows naturally within the overall speech, aligning seamlessly with the other key points. The tone should be intellectual and authoritative, yet accessible, mirroring Mel Robbins' approach. The language should be clear and direct, with a focus on psychological and philosophical depth. Avoid any formal headings, keeping the delivery conversational, as if speaking to an audience in a lecture or interview format. Conclude with a powerful, concise closing statement that leaves the audience with something to reflect on, motivating them to act on the insights shared. ChatGPT said, "Let's talk about something most people completely misunderstand about avoidance. The paradox of emotional safety." See, when most of us think of emotional safety, we think closeness, vulnerability, deep conversations, constant reassurance. But to an avoidant, that same level of closeness can feel like a threat to their autonomy. What feels comforting to you might feel suffocating to them. It's not because they don't want love, it's because, to them, love has always come with a hidden cost. Losing their freedom, their sense of self, or their emotional control. Avoidants learned early that needing someone meant depending on something unpredictable. So, they built an emotional operating system based on independence. They survive by being self-contained, emotionally self-sufficient to a fault. The more they rely on themselves, the safer they feel. So, when they meet someone who's highly emotional, expressive, or wants to talk everything out, their first instinct isn't intimacy, it's to retreat. Their nervous system associates that closeness with danger. Now here's where it gets fascinating. If you want to connect with someone who leans avoidant, the way in isn't through intensity. It's through calm. When they sense that you're emotionally stable, that you're not trying to pull them closer or demand connection, they begin to relax. They start to feel safe. Because to them, safety equals space. Think about that for a second. Safety equals space. That's the paradox. Most people think love means closing the gap, getting closer, merging lives and emotions. But with avoidance, love grows in the space you allow, not in the pressure you apply. When they feel you can be near them without needing something from them every second, without asking them to fix your emotions or mirror your intensity, they begin to trust you. And here's the psychological truth people move toward: what feels safe. If closeness feels unsafe, they'll pull back. But when distance feels respected, they'll lean in, slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. That's why emotional independence is magnetic to an avoidant. It tells them, you're free. You don't need to perform or be perfect to earn my affection. It's the emotional equivalent of giving them oxygen. When they feel free to breathe, they start to stay. When they feel you're okay, even when they pull back a little, they start to believe love doesn't have to mean losing themselves. This is why chasing doesn't work. When you chase an avoidant, when you try to talk them into connection, fix the silence, or demand reassurance, what you're really doing is confirming their worst fear, that intimacy means pressure. That love will trap them. That being needed equals losing control. But when you can meet their space with your own calm, when you can hold your ground without collapsing into anxiety, you're sending a completely different message. You're saying, you're safe. You can come closer when you're ready. That's powerful energy. It's not passive. It's not about pretending not to care. It's about understanding how to connect in a way that honors both people's nervous systems. You create emotional safety by embodying it. When you're grounded, composed, and secure within yourself, your energy communicates something words never could, that you don't need to control the connection to feel whole. And here's the beautiful irony. Once an avoidant senses that freedom with you, they start showing up more consistently. They open up in small, subtle ways. Maybe they share something personal. Maybe they initiate plans. Maybe they let you in emotionally without even realizing it. It's not a dramatic shift, but it's real. Because their fear starts dissolving in the face of your steadiness. From a philosophical perspective, this is love at its most mature form. Love without control. It's not about chasing, proving, or performing. It's about presence, showing up calm and whole, allowing another person to come toward you on their own terms. And let's be honest, that takes strength. It takes self-awareness. It means learning to sit with your own discomfort instead of reacting to theirs. It means realizing that love isn't about constant proximity. It's about emotional resonance. It's about holding space without filling it. So if you've ever found yourself in that push and pull dynamic, where every time you move closer, they move away, try something radical, stop chasing the connection, create space, find peace within yourself first. Let your calm be the invitation, not your anxiety. Because in the end, but the paradox of emotional safety is this: the more freedom you offer, the more connection you earn. Love isn't about pulling someone in. It's about standing still with enough self-trust that they can choose to come closer. When you stop chasing love and start respecting space, you don't lose connection. You create the only kind of safety an avoidant truly trusts. One of the hardest lessons to learn, especially when you care deeply about someone who keeps pulling away, is that intensity doesn't build connection. Consistency does. In fact, when it comes to avoidant personalities, the more emotionally reactive you become, the more unsafe they feel. It's not because they're cold or detached, but because their system interprets unpredictability as chaos. And chaos, to them, means danger. We often confuse passion with connection. We think if we show them how much we care, through big gestures, long emotional talks, or bursts of affection, they'll finally see how much we love them. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, that intensity feels like pressure. It sends their nervous system into defense mode. They start thinking, this is too much, I'm losing my balance here. And so they pull back, not to punish you, but to regain emotional control. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional fluctuations. They notice the tone shifts, the subtle energy changes, the emotional temperature of the room. So, when you go from calm to anxious, from confident to desperate, they don't see love, they see instability. And instability to them means risk. That's why emotional consistency is so attractive to avoidance. It represents safety. When you are calm and predictable, when your reactions don't escalate based on their behavior, you become someone their system can trust. It's important to understand that avoidants didn't grow up trusting emotional closeness. Often, They experienced love as inconsistent, sometimes nurturing, sometimes neglectful. So they learned to regulate themselves by shutting down emotionally. To survive, they decided, I'll depend on no one. So when they meet someone who is emotionally steady, someone who doesn't push, doesn't panic, doesn't guilt them into connection, it challenges everything they believe about love. It feels foreign at first, maybe even uncomfortable. But over time, that steadiness becomes magnetic. Consistency communicates something deeper than words ever could. I'm safe. You can trust my energy. And trust is what dissolves avoidance, not persuasion. Trust. You might be wondering, how do I stay calm when someone keeps pulling away? How do I remain consistent when I feel rejected or unseen? The truth is, it's not easy. It requires emotional self-mastery. It means learning how to soothe your own anxiety instead of outsourcing it to someone who can't meet you there yet. It means realizing that your emotional regulation is not their responsibility. When you respond calmly to distance, when you don't chase, argue, or spiral, you're teaching the other person something powerful, that love doesn't have to be overwhelming, that it can be peaceful. You're reprogramming their emotional association with connection. You're showing them that being close to someone doesn't mean chaos. It can mean calm. Think of it like this. If every time they pull away, you panic, you confirm their fear that intimacy leads to emotional volatility. But if every time they pull away, you remain composed, you rewrite that narrative. You show them that love can coexist with freedom. That connection doesn't have to threaten their autonomy. And here's the beautiful part: calm consistency doesn't just affect them. It transforms you. It teaches you emotional discipline. It strengthens your boundaries. It helps you discover the difference between attachment and alignment. Because when you can remain steady in the presence of uncertainty, you're no longer chasing love from a place of fear. You're embodying it from a place of strength. There's a quiet power in not reacting. It's not indifference. It's self-respect. It's saying, I can hold space for this moment without losing myself in it. And when you do that, something shifts. The energy between you changes. The avoidant starts to sense that your calm is not a threat. It's an anchor. From a psychological standpoint, this is what creates secure attachment. It's not about having perfect communication or constant closeness. It's about emotional predictability. When someone can count on your energy, not your words, that's when they begin to feel safe enough to stay connected. And from a philosophical perspective, consistency is love in action. It's not glamorous or dramatic. It's quiet, steady, and enduring. It's showing up not with fireworks, but with presence. Because love isn't about intensity that burns bright and fades. It's about warmth that lasts. So if you want an avoidant to see you as the one, don't focus on proving your love through emotional highs and lows. Focus on being steady. Be the calm in their storm. Be the peace they can't find anywhere else. Because at the end of the day, the most attractive energy in the world isn't excitement. It's safety. When you stop reacting to their distance and start embodying calm consistency, you don't chase their love. You inspire their trust. Let's get to the heart of it. The real reason an avoidant person starts to see someone as the one. It's not your looks. It's not how much you give, how much you care, or even how patient you are. It's your emotional stability. It's your ability to stay calm, grounded, and emotionally self-sufficient even when things feel uncertain. Avoidants are drawn to people who carry a sense of peace within themselves because peace is something they don't often feel inside. When you're emotionally secure, Your energy communicates something powerful: safety without control. You're not demanding closeness. You're not trying to fix them. You're not measuring your worth by their response. You simply exist with a sense of internal stability that tells their nervous system, you're safe here. And that's the paradox. The very thing that makes them fall for you is not your effort to connect. It's your ability to not need them to define your emotional state. That kind of calm presence disarms their fear. It creates an environment where their walls can lower, not because you tore them down, but because they no longer feel the need to hold them up. Here's the psychological truth. Emotional security is contagious. Our nervous systems constantly communicate, even in silence. When you're grounded, you regulate not just yourself, but also the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. You become the anchor in moments of tension. You're not reacting, you're responding. You're not spiraling, you're steady. And avoidants pick up on that more than words, promises, or reassurances ever could. Think about how most people respond to emotional distance. They panic. They start overanalyzing, sending more texts, replaying every interaction in their head. That anxious energy amplifies the avoidance fear, confirming that closeness equals chaos. But when you remain composed, when you can say, I'm okay, even if you need space right now, you flip their script. You show them that love doesn't have to mean loss of freedom. It can mean peace. That's emotional self-mastery. The ability to manage your inner world instead of letting someone else's behavior dictate your emotional state. It's not coldness. It's control in the best sense of the word. Because control of self is the highest form of freedom. From a philosophical standpoint, this is where real attraction begins. We're all drawn to people who make us feel safe enough to be ourselves. For avoidants, that feeling is rare. So when they encounter someone who embodies emotional security, it's like finding water in a desert. They may resist it at first, but something deep inside recognizes it as the kind of love that doesn't threaten, doesn't consume, doesn't demand. This is why emotional security is not just attractive. It's transformative. You stop trying to get love and start being loved. You stop trying to earn peace from someone else and start radiating it from within. And that changes everything, not only in your relationships, but in how you move through life. Because when you're no longer ruled by emotional reactivity, you become magnetic. Not because you're chasing, but because you're centered. Avoidants, like anyone else, are searching for a sense of safety, but they're doing it through distance. Your job isn't to bridge that gap with pressure or persuasion. It's to become so emotionally stable that your presence itself becomes the bridge. When they see that your peace doesn't depend on their behavior, that you can hold space without collapsing into anxiety, they begin to trust you. They start to think, maybe I can be close to this person and still be me. And that's the moment everything starts to shift. That's when the avoidant starts associating connection with safety instead of fear. They start coming closer not because you pulled them in, but because your energy gave them permission to. It's easy to underestimate how powerful that kind of emotional maturity is. But it's the difference between short-term attraction and lasting connection. Because looks fade, chemistry fluctuates, and intensity burns out. But emotional security, that steady, unshakable calm, that's what stays. That's what makes an avoidant say, I don't feel trapped with this person. I feel free. And isn't that what we all want? To be loved in a way that makes us feel free, not bound. To be seen without being smothered. Emotional self-mastery gives you that kind of love. The kind that doesn't cling, doesn't chase, and doesn't crumble when tested. So, if you want to be the one an avoidant truly sees as different, focus less on convincing and more on becoming. Don't prove you're worth staying for. Embody it. Show it through your steadiness, your emotional boundaries, your peace under pressure. Because in a world full of noise, your calm becomes their clarity. When you master your emotions, you stop being affected by their distance and start becoming the presence that makes them feel safe enough to stay. One of the most powerful truths you can realize in any relationship, especially with someone who leans avoidant, is this: love doesn't thrive where there are no boundaries. It thrives where boundaries are clear. The reason so many people end up stuck in painful cycles with avoidant partners isn't because the love isn't real. It's because the boundaries are missing. And when you don't have boundaries, the relationship becomes an emotional tug of war between fear and validation. Avoidants respect people who respect themselves. It's that simple. They may not always say it out loud, but they are instinctively drawn to individuals who have a strong sense of self. People who don't lose their balance when things get distant. People who don't chase approval just to keep the peace. To an avoidant, boundaries aren't rejection. They're structure. They're clarity. And clarity feels safe. When you set a boundary, you're not building a wall. You're defining where self-respect begins. It's the moment you say, I can love you deeply, but I will not abandon myself to do it. That kind of strength doesn't repel an avoidant, it attracts them. Because for someone who's terrified of losing their autonomy, seeing you hold on to yours is comforting. It tells them you're not going to disappear into the relationship. You're not going to demand they fill every emotional gap inside you. You're meeting them from a place of wholeness, not need. And this is the shift that changes everything. When you start showing up with clear, calm boundaries, you stop reacting to their distance with panic. You start responding with clarity. If they pull back, you don't chase. You give them space. If they overstep, you speak up, not from anger, but from self-respect. You stop playing emotional tug of war and start leading from stability. And that's the kind of energy that earns long-term respect. Psychologically, boundaries are safety signals. They show both people where emotional space begins and ends. For avoidants, who often associate intimacy with control, your boundaries become proof that closeness doesn't have to mean losing freedom. You're modeling secure love, love that's not chaotic, not demanding, but balanced. And that's what begins to rewrite their internal story about connection. But here's the thing, setting boundaries isn't just about saying no. It's about knowing your yas. It's about understanding your values, your limits, your emotional capacity, and having the courage to uphold them, even when your fear of loss tries to talk you out of it. It's saying, I want this relationship, but not at the cost of my peace. And that level of honesty doesn't just protect you. It also teaches the avoidant person how to relate to you in a healthier way. People learn how to treat you by watching how you treat yourself. If you constantly overextend, tolerate emotional neglect, or silence your needs just to keep the connection, you're teaching them that your boundaries are negotiable. But when you calmly enforce limits, when you walk away from disrespect, when you protect your energy without guilt, you're sending a message that says, I know my worth, and I expect the same level of emotional responsibility in return. That doesn't make you difficult. It makes you grounded. And grounded people are magnetic. Because when someone sees you standing firm in your values, they know they can trust you. Your words mean something. Your presence has weight. You're not easily shaken, And that steadiness becomes the emotional foundation the relationship can build upon. Philosophically speaking, boundaries are love's framework. They turn emotional chaos into harmony. They transform relationships from dependency into partnership. A relationship without boundaries is like music without rhythm. It may still produce sound, but it lacks balance and flow. The moments of space and the moments of closeness are what make love sustainable. This is especially true with avoidants. They need to see that you can hold your own emotional ground, that when they take space, you don't crumble, that when they cross a line, you can calmly realign. You become the mirror that reflects a different way of relating, one where connection and individuality can coexist. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. When you stop trying to win love through sacrifice and start protecting your energy with respect, everything changes. You stop chasing love and start modeling it. You stop being afraid of losing someone and start trusting that the right person will stay because they feel free, respected, and inspired by your strength. So, if you want to rewrite the attachment dance, start here, by leading with boundaries that honor your self-worth. Because the truth is, love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-abandonment dressed as devotion. When you honor your limits, you don't push love away, you teach it how to meet you on higher ground. At some point, you have to stop asking, how do I make them love me? And start asking, how do I become the kind of person love can't help but move toward? Because that's the real shift. The transformation from chasing love to becoming love. And this is where everything changes, not just with avoidance, but in every kind of relationship you'll ever have. Most of us spend our lives trying to earn connection. We adapt, we overgive, we perform, hoping that if we just love hard enough, someone will finally choose us back. But that energy is rooted in fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of not being enough, the fear that love has to be won. And when you operate from that place, you unintentionally confirm the very belief that drives avoidance away, that love comes with pressure, that love demands instead of invites. The moment you stop chasing love and start grounding yourself in it. When your sense of worth isn't tied to someone's response, you become emotionally magnetic because your presence shifts. You're no longer radiating anxiety, you're radiating self-trust. And self-trust is the language of emotional safety. Avoidants don't fall in love with words. They fall in love with the feeling of peace your energy gives them. They fall in love when your presence feels like freedom, not control. When they sense that being close to you won't cost them their individuality. And that's the irony. The moment you stop needing them to choose you, you become the person they can finally choose without fear. You see, everything in an avoidant dynamic is about energy. When you're anxious, when you're clinging, when you're constantly scanning for signs of rejection, that energy is felt, even if you never say a word. But when you're calm, when you trust the flow, when you know that your peace doesn't depend on their actions, they start to feel safe enough to come closer. You're not signaling danger anymore. You're signaling safety. That's what true transformation looks like. When love stops being a pursuit and becomes a reflection of who you are. It's when you've done the inner work to regulate your emotions, heal your attachment patterns, and define your worth apart from anyone else's approval. You stop performing. You stop begging for crumbs of affection. You stop letting someone else's inconsistency dictate your peace. And it's not about becoming detached or indifferent. It's about becoming whole. You start to embody what psychologists call a secure base. It's an internal state where you're anchored in your own emotional world. You can love without losing yourself. You can give without needing it to be returned immediately. You can stand still when others pull away because you're no longer trying to prove your worth. You know it. That's what makes you the one in the eyes of an avoidant, not perfection. Not playing games, not pretending not to care, but genuine self-possession, the kind of emotional stability that says, I'm safe with myself, and that means you can be safe with me. That kind of energy is irresistible because it's rare. Most people operate from emotional volatility. So when someone walks into the room calm, self-assured, and whole, it feels like gravity. From a philosophical point of view, this transformation is about remembering that love was never meant to be something you chase. Love, in its purest form, isn't found. It's recognized. It's something you align with by becoming emotionally conscious, by living in truth, by embodying peace instead of searching for it in others. And the more you do that, the more everything around you starts to change. The people you attract change. The energy you tolerate changes. You stop confusing chemistry with chaos. You stop settling for half-hearted love because you've learned to give yourself the full version. You realize that the deepest form of intimacy doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself first. When you get to that place, when your emotional world no longer depends on someone else's, that's when love becomes easy, because it's no longer about survival. It's about resonance. It's two people meeting as equals, both whole, both free, both choosing connection not out of fear, but out of peace. And that's what every avoidant secretly longs for. A connection that doesn't threaten their independence, but complements it. A relationship where love doesn't demand, it invites. And when you embody that, you stop being the person who chases them and become the one they can finally stop running from. So, if you take nothing else from this entire message, take this. The most powerful thing you can ever do is become the source of the love you've been trying to receive. When you do that, you stop needing validation, you stop clinging to inconsistency, and you start attracting people who match your energy, grounded, calm, ready. Because the moment you become love itself, you stop searching for the one and start becoming the one they were always meant to find.